All right. So this is just a brief overview of how uh, things got started as federal programs, and then it became a little bit bigger. Um, I love this one sentence at the bottom. We suffer from a problem of allocation of resources, which drives an ecosystem based on scarcity mindset and competition for limited subsidy. And I'm telling all of you all that are developers, no matter what stage you're in, that's the scam, to make you think it's very limited resources and it's survival of the fittest and it's dog eat dog and it's all this thing. And while that does breed for more successful applications, it's just simply not true. There is more than enough resources to go around. And now more than ever, with the CARES Act and all the stuff that's coming through, we have more money than we can shake a stick at. So that's not really the issue. It's just, I think it's up to us as developers to tell folks how we want those funds to be directed. And I think it's also a responsibility for us to make sure that we put these monies get into the right hands. So for some of you who are in organizations that do advocacy, this is something that you want to pay close attention to. So this is the ecosystem of players. So we talked about developers and owners, and you can still have that same title even if you're a nonprofit. As well as I know we often think of a developer as a for-profit entity. And then there's the government. So we're going to go through each one, but we're going to make sure as I zip through these things, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask them. So we already know that developers can be not-for-profits, for-profits. You can be a sole proprietor. And however you got yourself into affordable housing, you're adding things into your portfolio, that's fine. So then you have the nonprofits, like some of us on this call are here. Some of us are affordable housing agencies. Some of us are supportive services providers, human service agencies, um, you name it. Some of us are faith-based. So, the only thing that's different between us and a for-profit is that our goal is not to make a profit, but at the end of the day, we're all a corporation. So if you're going into projects that are hoping to sink your organization, that's kind of not the way to go. You want to make sure that you're taking on projects that you can see yourself, that's not going to put you in the red, but heavily into the black. Um, then you have your for-profit private entities. Um, I like that we mentioned on the third bullet that we have equity investment through LIHTC, so that's low income housing tax credit for those of you who are not used to the alphabet soup with housing. Opportunity zones for, I don't know all the ones in Rochester, but our governor, I think a year or so ago, asked the municipalities to come up with opportunity zones. So these are areas that are ripe for development, and that if you propose a development in those areas, there are some incentives. So not only tax credits, but you can get, a cut, like not a cut, but a reduced uh, land price. And you usually, if you're submitting for state subsidies, you're more likely to get funded because those areas have been earmarked as opportunity zones. So that's something that you definitely want to keep in mind when you are looking for development. For those of you who are like, we have an idea, but we're not really too sure where we want to go with that. That's something to look at. And then we know um, the government. And for all of us on this call, most of us will be dealing with one major player, which is New York State Department of Housing and Community Renewal. You know them as HCR, but many of us are going to be going to them for a lot of our financing. Um, they also run, all the HUD programs. Um, and then when they talk about public housing authorities, the municipal housing, they actually should have money that we can apply for development, but they are not really usually set up to be successful in that way. So next slide, please.
This can just be like a take-home source for reference. So
Yes.
we're not going to expect you to memorize all of this. Neither I nor Stephanie would be able to
No,
make
and we're
it.
not testing you. That would be a really bad test if we did.
But these are the nationally based programs that
Yes.
go through.
So sometimes, if any of you have a more frontline work, community-based organizations, you'll have people say, is this a Section 8 apartment? And years ago, you would be able to get funding from HUD to do to have affordability locked in, and it would be a Section 8 sponsored project, and therefore there's subsidies already built in. I was on the board of the Y, where we had a Section 8 building, and they usually came with reduced rents that was already built into the project. Sometimes they have incentives like the utilities are covered. Sometimes the cable is covered, other resources like that. Then you have the Section 8 tenant-based voucher, which is a payment that tenants can use so that they can have access to high quality, well, all of it should be high quality, but quality housing that they cannot afford. So based on their income, let's just say they would decide that they want to move to Williamsville because they want to be in a school district that they feel is better for their children. But they may not be able to afford $1,300 a month for rent. The Section 8 tenant-based voucher gives you the ability to make that affordable for you. In order for people to get that, you usually have to be working. You usually need to have a decent source of income. But it's not for people who um, are low income. Like if you're already low to moderate income, more than likely you're not going to need the voucher because you would qualify for low income housing. But let's just say you're in a rural area or an area with those, but that's not available. You can use your voucher and they have to take that. If they refuse your voucher, that's discrimination. And we have a group called Home Housing Opportunities Made Equal that will support you if that ever happened to you or a client that you know of. LIHTC, the low income housing tax credit, is very fancy, very detailed, really a lot going on. The big programs with HUD that you all will likely be getting funding from is through Home. CDBG is kind of loose, but if you are an organization that's into asset mapping, doing community planning, doing beautification projects, you might want to submit 2 applications at the same time. So CDBG is for the person, Home is for the built environment. So you will want to say that we're building housing, but we also want to offer supportive services on the first floor of our building. That's a place to go to. And the rest of these are mostly HUD based programs for municipal entities, and the other one is for agriculture. Sorry, next slide. Okay. It's like how my brain was before I got on this session. So here's what we want to make sure that you are aware of your options. As developers, when we're talking about affordable housing, I really like the way that we have put them one under market housing, families with low income, and then subsidized housing. Do understand that the I would only speak for New York. You can have all of these options as subsidized housing. They all can start off in a certain way and then mature or develop into something else. So for those of you who are familiar with rent to own programs, you can do a rent to own that goes into a condo or a co-op. It has never been done in the city of Buffalo successfully, but that doesn't mean that one of you on this call will not be the ones to be able to do that. And one thing I want to say before I get into these, I'm just going to breeze over some of them because we got a lot to cover today. Do understand that when we're working with funders that are on an antiquated system of something from 50 years ago, if you're coming up with something that's a cooperative, a collective, something that they're not used to seeing, you're going to have a hard time trying to get your application to be successful. So you have to make a believer out of them. So if you want to say that I want to do a LIHTC, but only do it for single family homes, they've never seen that before, right? Because usually when you're looking at low income housing tax credit, you're looking at multifamily housing, not single family homes that's going to be sold. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. It's just that you have to figure out a way on how you want to use that money. So I do encourage you that even though we're saying that these things are traditional ways of doing that, you can still figure out a way to be creative with the funding sources and sell your project. Sell them. You can make a believer out of them and say, this community, this is what they can do. So you want to really look into that. We have Ayat, you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. So I have a program that I'm working on where we're taking a single and a double, and after the tenants complete, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you good.
Where the tenants take, educational classes, credit rebuilding, job training, etc., through other agencies in Buffalo, they get a quarterly rebate when they do the credit hours, and the goal is for them to take that quarterly rebate and save it for down payment, attend the first time homebuyers club, and become mortgage ready. That wouldn't be considered a rent to own, would it?
Yeah,
Oh, really?
yes, yeah. So remember, rent to own, even though you don't see it here, is rent to own is a program. Rent to own is a program. You're still going to follow the traditional funding sources. You can do LIHTC and rent to own. You can do home dollars. You can do some things. So I don't know if it's here or in further slides, but I'm just going to give you some terms that you might hear coming up. You may hear something called rapid rehousing. That's homeless shelter. So just like in any field, there's coming up with new terms over and over and over again, different times. I'm just letting you know what it is. So if you would hear rapid rehousing, that's the program where people need to be housed because they're in unsafe situations. So let's just say it was a domestic violence situation. The person needs to rapidly be rehoused into safe housing that they can afford. So usually that's homeless shelters because you're going to be someplace temporarily. Transit housing, transitional housing, meaning I'm transitioning from the shelter to temporary, like maybe an SRO, which SRO is single room occupancy, until I can get my feet together. I might be in rapid rehousing, and then I can go into permanent housing. Permanent housing is in single family home. Permanent housing is when you're in a space that has a lease or a something tied to it. So permanent housing can be rental housing, or it can be a single family home. So just get your mind kind of around that. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but when we can do our one-on-one sessions, we can definitely go back into the detail on some of these things a little bit more. So you can go to the next slide. Ooh, debt. Did we have to start there, Maggie? So this is the breakdown of what you're going to be looking at and how these terms are used when you're submitting an application, when you're submitting your LIHTC, when you're submitting your home funding or a housing trust fund. That housing trust fund is usually 12 units. There's another program with Community Preservation Corp. I think it's called PLP or PIP. It may be PIP or PLP. Anyway, that one is for projects that's up to 24 units. They consider that small scale. So they want you to be able to answer these questions. They want you to be able to know what these are. So I'm going to go with the ones that I know best, which is the pro forma. That's the Bible. That is the Bible. It needs to be in Excel. If you want to be cute, you can, but it needs to be in Excel. It needs to be this ridiculously long spreadsheet that takes you from start to finish. So you have a pro forma during construction. That's your construction budget. Some people call it a development budget. It can be separate. Your construction budget may be only hard costs. Your development budget is both soft and hard costs. Then you need to stretch that out over the term of the construction period. So it may be a 12 months, or it may be labeled from January to December. However, whenever you start your project. Then your other pro forma will be, and this will all be in the same file. Then your pro forma is your operating budget. So how am I going to operate? How is this building going to fund itself during the affordability period? So at the minimum, it's going to be 15 years. So it's going to be, if you're looking at a spreadsheet, and I should have pulled one up, it says year one. Now that's going to trick you guys up, and this would have been a good quiz for you. Year one is not the year that you start rent up. No, no, no. Year one is the year post closing. You've gone to permanent closing with your funder, and you have started, now you're starting your affordability period. So let's just say you stop construction July 1st. You do 60 days of rent up. So you start your tenant, to you, your year one starts September 1. No, no, no. Your year one starts when you've gone to permanent closing with your funding source. That's the year one. And where we talk about the operating subsidy is what's gonna be the subsidy you need to cover the expenses until the tenants can start, until the building or the project can start accumulating rents. So let's just say you did a gut rehab, or you did an adaptive reuse of a building. Great, I love that. And the tenants in, and then now that the tenants are in the building, the plumbing goes. Like we just did the plumbing. You have no money in your operating budget, so you're gonna have to, you're gonna have to borrow from the project to get that caught up to speed until your tenants are paying rent.
Or sue your contractor because you had an excellent.
Yes. So, Maggie, do you mind going over the debt and equity piece?
Yeah, so let's just quickly go through this, but I think we're going to continue going through some examples that will be helpful. So when we say debt, like Stephanie said, that's money borrowed. Equity is money that you are bringing in one way, shape, or form to the table. So the equity will show up as your land value. If you own your site already, it could show up as your tax credit equity, right? Because you're bringing those investors to the table. You could also bring equity into the project through a foundation. So there's a couple different ways, or possibly through a partner, right? A partner might also add some equity to the project.
Right, and they might be called the equity partner. So we'll see that as we go on in the slides, as we progress here.
Any questions on this one before we go? We'll get more info, and if you have a question pop into your head, just put it in the chat.
If we were a private investor building to own rental housing, how would we pay for it?
Please chime in, anyone.
Legally, that we should have put that in there. Legally, how would we pay? How would we pay for it? You got this money. You want to do some renter housing, how would you pay for it? So think of that answer. Christiana says out of pocket? Question mark.
How
Out of
does
whose
the
pocket?
developer do a project? Anyone?
Yeah. Now let's see what the next slide says. This is how you finance a project.
So on the far, I think it's the right side of your screen. I'll have to double check the share. But the
Well,
green and blue, equity and hard debt, that's a simple, like, hey, you're a developer, you're showing up, you're doing a project. You're bringing equity and you're getting debt.
Right.
And these other examples are more about affordable housing that I'll let Stephanie speak to.
Yep. So the you can, the old way, the old way is you have many of us are going to be getting into speculative housing, meaning that we have no idea who the end user is going to be. But in the olden days, you would have already had a list of folks that were interested in your product. So you already have that list. So just like or a commercial lease, you already know who your tenants are going to be and how much they're going to be charging for this space. Then you take that to your developer oh, I forgot you guys can't see me. I'm like doing all these antics. You take it to your architect. You design, you say, well, this is what I'm looking at. This is what I'm looking for. I can probably get this land, blah, blah, blah. Then you go to the bank with your potential tenants or end users, your design, your scope, and then your approvals in process. And they say, okay, you need $6 million. You put up what you need to put up for, you got your $6 million and you start building. Everybody's happy. I'm not, because I just could not imagine taking on that much debt. Then there's the other one where you still have the debt because the project is not paying for itself. You have some equity, let's just say, and there's not room, we don't show it here, but there's social equity with people and stuff like that. That's for another time. And you can look at things like, let's just say you're in the opportunity zone, you can get the land, you can get 5, whatever parcels for $1. Or you can get, you have an investment partner that already has the land. So you're walking into that and all you got to do is come up with this design. So it's different ways that you can look at that if you're intermediate affordable. Now, in this intermediate affordable, you're going to be looking at folks that are as close to 80% AMI as possible, and maybe going up to the 120% AMI level. So this is one of those programs where you can actually you can do this as a loan. Like I said, Community Preservation Corp has a great product for this. If you are a for-profit developer, but you don't want to use all your financing right now, if you agree to keep the units between 80 to 90% area median income, they will loan you this money as hard debt, but the project can pay for itself, and you don't have as much restrictions. When we get to the deeper affordability, you're looking into larger subsidies that are going to be needed because maybe your market shows that you can, the folks that are needed to housing the most is 30 to 50% AMI, and the market doesn't bear the cost for that. That's why sometimes when you're doing a LIHTC, they'll say it's a 4% deal or it's a 9% deal, depending upon the market in the area. One deeper affordability project that I think if our Habitat folks are online, this is usually where we follow our home ownership. This is usually where the home ownership projects, the Chodo projects, can go into because you're dealing with a cell that's at the end. So that can cover some of that. And then the ones that are deeper affordability with supportive services are always going to be a LIHTC, low income housing tax credit deal. Always. There's no way you can do that. Thanks, Maggie. She's always like quick with these things. I'm gonna be sad when this is over with. We make a good team. So your capital, your cash, is the buildings, the land, and the soft costs. These are all your costs that need to be included. And then your sources often are bank loans, your equity partners, family, friends, anybody. Also, some of the sources can be, if we're going after government sources, like homes and community renewal. I saw that, Maggie. Homes and community renewal, Federal Home Loan Bank, CDBG, HUD, ESHI, and the list can go on and on. But you want your debt is from these costs. Your debt is from the building, the acquisition. Your debt is from the land. Your debt is from the soft costs are usually anything that is not construction. So using your architect, your environmental, your acquisition, your loan closings, all that stuff. So yeah, you can go ahead to the next one. So income is what you're going to be getting for the rents of your units. You're going to see this in your operating pro forma. Again, that's your Bible. Anything that goes on, your change order, anything, you have to constantly be going back and forth to that pro forma. You need somebody that's really good with that and detailed, because that can completely mess up your project. If you decided that we're going to go with a different material, so we're going to use luxury vinyl tile instead of doing carpet, that needs to be switched over in that operating budget, because now you got to put in the cost to preserve that material. If you're doing an elevator, how much is it going to cost you to maintain that elevator? So income can be rent from the units. It can be, I don't want you to count your developer fee as income, because that's a one-time. So some people say you have residual income, you have recurring income, that kind of thing. We can get into that. Another source of income is if you sell the home. So let's just say you sell the home for $200,000, you get those closing fees because that's your home that you're selling. You get that when, at closing. Expenses is any kind of, again, back to that debt. So let's just say you took out a mortgage for the project, your utilities, the management. Again, you're looking at the other operating fees. That's also an expense. Is you need to have an operating reserve, a replacement reserve. Some people will call it a building reserve, but a replacement reserve. Then you need an account for your taxes and insurance. So all these things need to be separated out, and HCR has a specific formula for how much should be automatically taken out of the project from your rental income to be put into these pockets, these bank accounts, to make sure the project is run successfully. Next slide. And just so you all know, I have been on all sides of the project. I prefer just dealing with the budgets. But if you have questions on that, or you're at that stage in your proposal, do not hesitate. Don't work hard, work smart. How is affordable housing different economically? I think it's more based on what sources you use to cover your gap in financing. What makes it affordable is not necessarily your cost as a developer are not affordable. There's no cut on your side. You're paying the cost for quartz countertops. You're paying the full price. You're paying the full cost that your GC is charging you for construction. You get no cuts. So affordable housing is for the end user. So some people will say, well, to make it affordable, what I'm going to do is cut the material or use a poor quality material so that I don't have to pay so much on the front end. You're, as my grandmother would say, you're penny save, pound poor. You're going to pay anyway. So what's the point of cheaping out on materials? You want to build high quality so that these apartments can last, these homes can last. This is permanent. If you're at this side, you're doing permanent housing. Permanent housing, I mean, you want these people to live here as long as they would like. Rents are lower The lower the income, the lower the rent is paid. Now, this is the thing that a lot of people don't like with the developer. If you're getting funding from the state of New York, your rent, you cannot increase your rent for the first 5 years during the affordability period. So I'm going to tell you guys this now. I've learned this from experience. Whatever the HUD rates are for rent, make that your rent when you're submitting your application. Do not say, well, if the market says rent can only do for $400 a month, that project is not for you. You are not going to be able to maintain that project successfully. You are going to be in the red. I have been there. I'm raising my hand that you can't see, where we just were like, well, the market can only bear $400 a month rent. Okay, well, what happened is that nobody told that to the water department, user fees, or taxes. And nobody told that to our tenants who decided to pour oil down the sink when they wanted to get rid of it. Not a good thing, but because we didn't have enough in the operating reserve, because we didn't have enough of the rents coming in, that was a cost that we had to pay that put us in the hole. Think about that. Cost to build to fit requirements are higher. It's not, again, it is not economical on the developer side. It is not economical. This is because this is what you want to do, because you have a heart in it, you have a passion, you want the end user to have the best quality, and that's why you want to build in as many subsidies as possible, because it is not economical for you to spend $6 million on 50 units and you're getting rents at $500 a pop. It's just not. Here's no source wants to pay the whole amount of the gap. Absolutely not. That's why when you have a project that you see, this project is brought to you with $26 million. That means pretty much for every million, you got another funder in there. So you're probably going to have 10 sponsors, 10 investment partners, because no one wants to be the first money in. Competition for income for sources are significant. That is because it's just the nature of the beast. That doesn't mean to discourage you. You just have to make sure that you follow session 4 really well. Is it feasible? Can the numbers work? Is this the community that's right for this kind of development? Also, she has his state and local are replacing federal. Understand, with that transition, they're not acting as bank anymore, meaning that if you get an invoice from ABC Construction for the framing, you cannot give that to the state or local funder to pay that. You're going to have to still take out a capital loan, a construction loan from a reputable bank that is going to fund the program, fund the construction with interest-only payments while you're under construction. And those people are going to be on you every minute, because they do not want to have that money out there that long without the guarantee from the other resources coming in. Next slide.
I'm just gonna, Mark, I will answer your question at the end, because he's asking about new market tax credit, Stephanie, and I can answer that when you're done with your case.
Fantastic. Okay. So we're back here with capital subsidy sources to lower the total cost needed to build, own, and buy. So again, this is how Maggie used to say you're stacked, right? How are you stacking? And these are all your subsidy sources to make this project happen. So the government products are going to most likely be a loan to you. It will, how do I explain it? It's going to be considered a forgivable loan if you're a not-for-profit. So let's just say I use $1.8 million from Housing Trust Fund to build 8 units of affordable housing. I don't make any payments on it during the affordability period. I just make sure I maintain the project. At the end of the affordability period, then the state will say, we gave you $1.8 million for these units. Now, can you pay us back $1.8 million? That's when I have the greatest laugh of my life, feet in the air, full belly jiggle, and I say, of course not. And then they say, all right, we figured as much. So you just have to refinance it. And and it continues to go on from there. And they kind of know you're not going to pay back. I mean, but if something works out and you got it, great. But no, no. If you're a for-profit, you're going to have to pay that back. And that's why whoever's doing your pro formas, you don't have money to waste. If you are a for-profit and you're on this call, your numbers have to add up. You have to make sure every gap is spoken for. You have to have reserve on top of reserve. You have to be ready. And right now, this is the best time to try to get different products because the interest rates are really good. So if you're for profit, try to make it work. But like I said, you're going to have to pay that money back. There are ways to get around that, but we are recording. I will be able to share some resources for you. But I would strongly suggest that you partner with your neighboring community-based organization to figure out ways to try that out. Operating subsidies, the true loan forgiveness. I shouldn't be reading the chat. Okay. Operating subsidies, Section 8 are really good for that. You can get money back from NYSERDA. You can get stuff from National Grid and National Fuel. You do need to put that in the development budget so that's clear. And sometimes you can get things from service organizations to support the tenants, and that is in the form of a housing services agreement. Next slide, please. Okay. That's on you, Maggie.
I can just start coughing and get out of it.
Yes, of course.
So I think a lot of Stephanie's funny because a lot of this is just different terms for what she'd already said, because I think something to remember is when you start looking at sources, you want to pick the right source that fits what you're doing. So to completely oversimplify, if you're going to do something with single family homes or small scale development, like 20 units or less, you're going to be following up with Stephanie. If you're looking at a larger project and you have questions about financing and tax credits, you're probably going to want to follow up with me. And then I'll direct you to Stephanie as necessary because she knows more than just financing. But basically, you want to make sure when you look at those sources of equity and subsidies, every single one you put into that stack, and Stephanie has said this before, has strings attached, right?
Yep.
So you don't want to, put sources together that fit together. And you don't want to use sources that go against your goals and objectives, right? So the beginning of this class, we spent some time on that, and it's really important. In the next class, and I'm going to switch to the case studies because we only have Stephanie for 10 more minutes.
Okay.
In the next class, I'll be going into depth a little bit more on some of this and like next steps to kind of tee you up for our one-on-ones. But essentially, it depends on your project, depends on your goals. Doris, your question about loan forgiveness, yes, there are products that are forgiven or paid for out of financing, depending on who your lender is. But I like to say that the answer to any of these questions relating to financing typically are, it depends.
Right.
So not to scare you, and we can talk more about this tomorrow, next Monday, not tomorrow. I won't be here. But everything we just talked about feeds into what is your sources and uses summary, right? So you're taking your operating, this is your pro forma. You're taking your operating budget, your costs, and you're feeding that into how you're going to pay for your project. And then you're going to identify your sources and uses over time. So this is just an example. We can go through it more next week. And we'll also revisit this next week. Remember the graphic of the development process. You'll be visiting that with me next week. And now Stephanie is going to talk to you about case studies.
Yes. So this case study is our 8th unit. So this one is fun for those of you who are looking to do vacant lot infill, number one, to use Housing Trust Fund. Also, we used 1.5 million from Housing Trust Fund, and the other part, the total project was, I can't even remember, it was 2013, something like that. The other portion of it was from Federal Home Loan Bank to help. So that was our 2 stacks to do that. We did a vacant lot infill in Allentown on Hudson Street. We used mostly state funding to do that. This project involved 8 units of affordable housing. And the reason why this is a good case study for you all is because if you can see the 2 homes, well, this is one building here. We set it up like a townhome. Every tenant has their own porch. If you go down Hudson Street, it looks like it should have been there before. We had 3 vacant parcels, and we were able to put 2 properties. Each property has 4 units each. And as you can see there, that driveway, that's what separates the other building. That's the part that made me upset, is because at that time, the community was so against these low-income tenants clogging up their parking that we put this driveway there and then the parking in the rear. And for years, it sat vacant, which we would have loved to have more apartments than just to have this thing, because our tenants didn't make enough money to have cars. So I can't. Okay. Anyway, this project took several years to get going because of so much community pushback. If you see the house next to it, it's like kind of grayish. Again, it's 2 stories, no different than what's already on the street. I urge you, if you're looking to get into multifamily housing, start small. Really look at that townhome style model, especially if you're in urban areas. This is also an area that is a historic preservation area. So we could not have preserved the property because there wasn't a property there. There was a property there many years ago, but it's caught on fire. And so it wasn't there. So that's why we did our first vacant lot infill new build. We picked at that time colors that were already into the neighborhood. We did a Victorian color system. So again, that's usually if you use more than at least 3 colors, you definitely want to do that. We did not use vinyl siding. We used hardy board. So that's cementatious siding. So again, it can fit in with the quality of the other homes. Having that porch is a lot for our tenants, because there was no way for someone to say, oh, that's affordable housing and this is not. So you want to think about the perception that people have. People already, if they know they're going into affordable housing, people already have a stigma. We wanted to make sure that if your neighbor next door is grilling or they're out on the porch, sitting out, having some iced tea, having cocktails with friends, you have the right to do the same thing. This is permanent housing. We want you to live there and have a good time. So we do that. So I don't know if you have another photo, Maggie.
Not of this project, but I would recommend everyone go to Heart of the City Neighborhoods website and their Facebook page. There's a lot of great pictures.
Yes.
And it'll probably make you think of more questions for Stephanie. Stephanie, there's two more case studies, but I'm going to cut you off because I know what you have to do at 7.
No, it's 7:15. They just sent an update that they won't start until
then I will let you keep going.
So.
All right, then 2 more case studies.
Yep. So this oh this I love this one. Okay, so this one was the wit. Okay, I gotta I'm gonna talk like I'm selling a car. I love this one. This is my heart. I love preservation. Sometimes you can't figure out how to make it happen. This house was built 1892. How we started this project was through Leadership Buffalo. Leadership Buffalo said, "Hey, we're looking to get into doing an urban project as we culminate our Leadership Buffalo thing, and we thought of you. And do you have something?" And I was new executive director, but not new to affordable housing. And I said, "You know what? We would like to do a neighborhood perception study from people not from the neighborhood." So we had these Leadership Buffalo folks, and they're folks from various professions, usually not from Buffalo, didn't matter to me. I wanted their perception. And their perception of this neighborhood before we rehab this house is that it was disgusting. It was dark. They felt unsafe. And I know some people will say, "Oh, well, that's because they're not from the city of Buffalo." And no, 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 no. I felt the same way. So we figured out, and there's a term for this, and Christiana probably knows it, but I think it's like CSTEM or CSTEM or something like that. What we looked at was like, why did this particular street make people feel unsafe? And what can we do? So we had a development day. We did a block party, and that's how we do development. Harder City does development. We do a block party. We want to talk to everybody. We feed you, and we want to know what you think. And so that's first you get the kids out because you get the music and the food. And then the parents come out and say, "Well, what you got going on?" And we say, "Do we have an idea for you?" So that's one way to do your community engagement if you ever thought about want to do it. And it's $17 to get the street blocked off. So pretty cheap. So they said the same thing. Well, nothing's going to come in this neighborhood. Nope, blah, 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 blah. So what we did was we worked with the housing court system and we said, what's going on with these vacant properties? We had zombie houses all on Whitney Place between Virginia and Hudson. And they said, well, they have estate issues. Then we have Leadership Buffalo saying that it's scary. So what we did was we did multiple phases. We went and we trimmed the trees. And then we trimmed the trees, we cleaned up the neighborhood, and we called National Grid and said, "Hey, can you put some light bulbs in?" We had Leadership Buffalo come back. And they were just like, "Oh, this can't possibly be the same street. It must be another Whitney Place." And I'm just like, "Nope, this is the same street because we had these old trees. It created this dark presence. We installed dusk to dawn motion sensor lighting to create that effect that something's going on." Then we were able to use their perception of the neighborhood, and I applied to Affordable Housing Corporation to give us money to rehab these properties. So these properties had estate issues where the bank didn't complete the foreclosure. So we went to the bank and we said, "Hey, we got $5,000. We'll take it from you." And it worked. So we bought 4 properties, the 4 break-in properties on Whitney Place. We gutted them, we rehabbed them, we kept as much architectural character as we could, and we sold each of them. We had a bidding war on 192 because 192 had Jack and Jill bathrooms. It had in the middle of what would have been the dining room, it had the button in the floor where you would call for your servants. It had a bell that you would press with your foot and it would ring downstairs. And that's when you would tell your servants, "I need something, person, come upstairs and provide me that." It was so uniquely built. We kept all the original floors. Um, it was just a dream. But I love this one because this was the house that Jack built. Like we really try to do as much as we can. It was a sister that was just received her citizenship and was teaching Spanish at the school right at the corner, DeUville, I think it's School 3, Buffalo Public School 3. We were able to get her assistance to get into the house, and it just really worked out. So yeah, so all of them are all owner occupied. It's been, the last one was done in 2009, and that's actually the last time we were able to do a gut rehab because the neighborhood had completely able to right itself where we couldn't get a property for $5,000 ever again. And so yeah, so we love the Whitney Place project. So yeah, that's a cute one. Down memory lane. Oh, Mount Aaron. This is a JV, guys. This is a JV. This is between an affordable housing organization with a church. And that's all they were. They were a church that had vacant land next to their church, and they wanted to do something with it. We came in as a JV, being the stronger partner, saying that you need to create a CDC. We helped them through the process. We helped them secure the financing to get this project done. Um, and it came out to be 10 units of housing for seniors. It was part of this Silver Sneakers program where seniors wanted to stay in the Pratt Willett community in Buffalo, but they did not want to leave, but they did not want to keep up with the houses. The houses in the Pratt Willett community are pretty large, and that's a lot of house as you wanted to age in place. So we were finishing up our aging in place program, which was rehab, or owner occupied rehab. And so we decided to do a JV with the church to do something that would take people from rental. The better way to have done that is as they were moving in to scale down, we would have young families moving into those homes. But that takes a little bit more thought and process. But this was a $1.8 million project. It was 10 units. It was solely funded through the City of Buffalo Home Funds and Federal Home Loan Bank. And we had Federal Home Loan Bank was sponsored through M&T Bank, and then Evans Bank was our capital. So stack on stack on stack. We stayed with the church afterwards for a year for compliance, because that's an area that a lot of groups get stuck on. How do I make sure I serve all the masters and stay in compliance? So we stayed on as property manager. We helped them with the rent up. We helped them with all the files, the grant compliance. We made sure that all the loans were closed out. We did a cost certification. And for this project, it was really welcomed by the City of Buffalo. It was the first project that had been done in that area in the last 20 years. That JV started out with just, again, $1.8 million. And now that same church is doing a project further down Genesee for $26 million on their own. So your JV can work. You partner with an organization that is not only stronger in the experience, but they have someone that can teach you. I was hand in hand with this church from creating emails to the PR around this. Everything that was done, I did it with them, held their hand the entire way. So whoever you're doing the JV with, if you're on this call and you're in that position where you have property, you have an idea, but that's where you stop. You get a really strong partner and you let them know in the management agreement that you want to have technical assistance, that you want a binder that tells you how to do this project yourself. And so, yes, that's a big jump from less than 2 million to 26 million, but that shows that I did my job, that he felt confident to do that. It took him 4 years in the cycle, like Maggie had on one of the slides. It took him 4 years to get the $26 million project funded, but it got funded. So, that's something that you definitely want to see. That is a LIHTC project that they're doing. So, you got me for 9 minutes. Any questions, thoughts, Maggie?
No, that's great. I think, if anyone has any follow-up questions for Stephanie on how these were funded, feel free to shoot her an email.
Yep.
And then just quickly, while we have Stephanie for a few more minutes, next week we're going to recap and review. We're going to talk a little bit more about development advisors and partners and what that might look like. So Stephanie talked a little bit about Heart of the City and what they've done and how they can be a partner as a nonprofit community development housing organization. And we talked a little bit about JVs earlier, so we'll talk a little bit more about hiring development advisors, how you pay them out of your developer fee. I'm working on getting some names together in Buffalo and Rochester to share with you all of organizations and individuals. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps and schedule our one-on-ones next week. Your assignment for next week is to go ahead and reformat everything you've done to date and turn it into sort of an executive summary. So, take all the references to homework.
That's right.
Off of it, because now you've created this beautiful document. Here you are celebrating walking into the sunset. So I will pause for a second, and if anyone has any questions specifically for Stephanie, ask them now, and then we will go back over the feasibility assignment and some other questions when she's
absolutely. Okay. I don't know if there's stuff in the chat that I can answer because I saw stuff popping up, but I wasn't too sure. Or if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions? You can unmute yourself. Well, I definitely want to thank Stephanie. I mean, I could never have done this class alone ever. And anything related to, construction or affordable housing, especially, small scale affordable housing.
Yes.
She is your go-to.
Yes, I love these projects. You get to know them. I do want to say these two things because I won't be on the last session, because I'll be on vacation starting Friday. But hey, Lockport, I'm willing to work with you. I do want to say for those of you who are on this thing, in this series, please consider getting your real estate license. Not just for your own, not just for anything, I would say for the vocabulary. You really want to know what you're talking about. And this is not, it's male dominated field. It's not about that. You need to know what you're talking about because your end users, they don't know that. And they're hoping and they're depending on you. They're putting a lot of faith in you without knowing you. So you really want to get that language. You might be able to get your organization to pay for it. I'm not telling you to get, I don't have my real estate license is not held by anybody, but I got mine early on. And then I also put myself in the trainings that I was telling my tenants and potential homebuyers. So homebuyer education. And now I can teach homebuyer education for someone to teach it to somebody else. But you do need to make sure that you're talking when you preach. So if you want to make sure you have educated tenants, you need to make sure you're educated on what it is to be a tenant if you're not one yourself. If you own a home and you're doing rental projects, you might not have a concept of what it is to rent and what these things should look like. So you want to get yourself involved with that. The other tidbit of advice I want to give you, vet your development team like it is the marriage. Like this is a person you can be with this person for 4 years. You need to know them. You need to know them. When's the birthday? When your kids, what's your zodiac sign? Where you go to church? How do you like your coffee? We need to know each other real well because we're going to be together for a long time. So just vet them. Take your time. Do not say, it's got to be done. Take your time. Give yourself time to do it. Think about the end user. Get that real estate license, at least just the training alone. And do not be afraid to ask questions. If someone says something like, oh, well, we're going to do this, blah, 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 don't nod along, because the first question you want to ask is, and what's the cost on that? And is that going to slow down production? You want to be able to get yourself, remember, because at the end of the day, you might be dealing with, if you're a sole proprietor, you're the pro forma, you're the developer, you're the applicant, you're the, you don't have time for someone to be adding in some snazzy new thing that's going to cost you at the end, or not be reimbursed or paid for the project. So get that real estate knowledge. That's what I probably want to say. Watch those trashy shows like $1 Million Listing, because even though none of us are doing $1 Million Listing, think about how they market the product. You have to make sure that if you're doing speculative housing, how are you going to have a list of people to get into them? What's your market? Know that market really well, and ask questions. Make them teach you this process so that the next time you'll be ready. So that's my 10 cents. I'm here. I'll still be here. Ask the questions. I'm off.
Okay, so hopefully we can all head off a little early tonight. But I did just want to revisit the last assignment because we skipped it. So does anyone want to, and you know what I'll probably do is just bring it up. Does anyone want to share their assignment, or have any questions on the feasibility assignment? Feel free to unmute yourselves as well. So while everyone's switching gears back to the assignment, I just wanted to answer Mark's question about new market tax credits. So Mark asked, how do new market tax credits work in comparison to the LIHTC 4% and 9%? And that locally they don't seem to be used as frequently as the rest. Mark, I would say that is very accurate. I'm going to put new market tax credits are not easy to understand at all. And I am, even just being in the industry and, learning, and LISC has the New Market Support Corporation, which manages for LISC the new market allocation. So I have an article that I'll put in the chat that really explains it the best that I have found to date. But the long and short of it is new market tax credits are not for residential projects. So I think that's one of the reasons why we don't see them locally, is because we don't have a lot of real estate. We just don't have a lot of real estate in Western New York that's happening without residential. I know a couple of you on the call have talked to me about your projects, and you've been asked by funders and lenders to add units, right? That's what people like to underwrite housing, because they know there's demand. So that's the first barrier to using new market tax credits. The second is that it is an allocation granted to individual CDFIs. The recommendation, if you're seeking them, and it's for a transformative project. So the best examples I can give you are two projects I know of that are in the works right now. In Batavia, the YWCA is doing a large scale project that involves community resources and facilities for the community that aren't housing. So they're likely going to be on the list allocation. Mount Olive in Lackawanna is doing a project that involves grocery and office. And I believe it's also brownfield redevelopment, which we haven't even talked about yet. But so when you start getting into new market tax credits or tax credits in general, it just starts to get far more complicated. But it is competitive. Allocations are competitive. And hopefully we will see 1 or 2 new market tax credit projects pop up. The other project that may qualify for new market tax credit status is the Silo City renovation. And that's because it's just such a massive, large scale. They're building more than housing there. They're building basically a whole neighborhood, and they're reusing the grain elevators. So I'll drop this article in the chat. And if anyone has further questions about this source, or really any source, you know, between Stephanie and I, if we don't know it, we can find you someone to talk to who does. You know, Christiana's on. She's a great source for historic tax credit. If any of you are looking at adaptive reuse, I touched on the brownfield. If you know, I'll make sure to do a slide on that next week, just so everyone has some background knowledge on it. Any other questions for tonight? So basically the feasibility assignment is kind of going to be a summary at the end of your executive summary. Stephanie and I are going to be using these executive summaries. We're going to read them and then be reaching out to you for follow-up one-on-ones. So please make sure you upload those. And also please note, like, I know a couple people are here from the same organization. We'd be happy to do the one-on-one, you know, with your group, or if you want to bring in your boss or a colleague to the one-on-one, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So we will, again, we'll be using this kind of like final assignment, executive summary, and then we'll be reaching out to you to to schedule those follow-up one-on-ones and get everyone, you know, off the ground as developers. All right, if there's no other questions, I'm going to go take some more cold medication. Post-pandemic immune systems with babies are no fun. Thanks, everyone.